Born in Los Angeles, California, to a pair of screenwriters, Hallie Ephron is a novelist, book reviewer, journalist, and writing teacher. A New York Times best-selling author, she loves suspense and spins the tales of her suburban-based thrillers to the ongoing enthusiasm of a breathless reading public. Hallie Ephron, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you were born into a family of writers, but didn't embrace the craft right away. Do I have that right?
You got that exactly right. I was the one who said I don't write. Everybody else writes, and I just didn't. I mean, my parents were writers. My older sister was a internationally known writer. My younger sister had a bushel of novels out. My other older sister, and I was the one who lived in the Boston area. I drove my kids to soccer practice. I taught. I worked in high tech. I didn't have time to write, and besides which, I needed to make enough money to get my kids through college, and did not come into an inheritance, sadly.
Yeah.
But none of us did.
It's
So
a bummer how that happens. Yeah, that hasn't happened for me yet either. So I'm still
yeah,
waiting on my windfall. But you've spent years teaching prior to beginning to it. Now do you still do some teaching?
I do, and I always I think in a lot of ways I'm a better teacher than I am a writer.
Well, you must be
And
a hell of a teacher then.
I am a hell of a teacher. Yeah, I learned everything in third grade, teaching third grade.
Yeah.
If you can teach third grade, you can teach anything. I've really learned how to well get people interested and engaged and work with you. And I love teaching. I don't have time to teach on a regular basis, but I go to writing conferences. So I have a writing conference coming up in Portland at the Willamette Writers Conference. I'll be in Vancouver at the Surrey Writers Conference. I go wherever I get asked, and I've written a writing book, which also does very well at the moment. And so writing, it makes a life. You know, as a writer, you're very isolated. And if you're teaching or doing whatever something else is, it gets you out of the house. It gets you connected with people, and it also creates an income stream to make the life possible.
Right. Absolutely. Now, am I also correct in thinking that at the beginning you worked with a co-writer?
I did, and that's a testament to how unsure I was that I had anything to say, because I thought, what am I going to write about? Being a mother, working in high tech, this is boring stuff. And so I wrote with a man who is a forensic neuropsychologist. He runs a unit at Harvard's fabled McLean, which is a psychiatric hospital, and he testifies in court when people are accused of murder. He'll evaluate them. He has this really interesting life, thoroughly nice guy, old friend, reads a ton of mystery novels, loves the genre. And so we just started to collaborate. We just started to talk about cases he'd worked on and how they might be made not about the people, the real people, but just about the themes and the kind of plot pieces and stringing them together. And we wrote 5 novels for St. Martin's, the Peter Zach mystery series, and it was a lot of fun. It gave me courage. It gave me confidence. I found out I could write. And then I realized I could write about my experiences, about domesticity, about that there is an audience for real stories cloaked in mysteries and suspense.
Absolutely. I think there's a larger audience than a lot of people realize, and I guess, you found that to be true, but as a reader, and I've talked to a lot of other people who they prefer that type of, like, for example, you're in called like suburban suspense kind of stuff because it's very close to home. It
Yeah.
makes sense to them. They can relate to it. Whereas a lot of the books where you've got the ex-Navy SEAL, the six-pack abs, doing all. I mean, who can
Right.
who can relate to this?
Flying
So,
the airplane and
right.
getting out the Uzi. I mean, really,
It's
no.
all cool,
No,
but I don't know what the hell they're talking about. So
yeah,
it's always,
yeah.
but
No, I like to write mysteries that could happen to you, that
yes.
really could happen. And I think that's what makes them in some ways scarier because they're real. It's all about relationships. I like to write a lot about families and about husband and wife, about generations. And I don't like to write like super bad villains.
Mhm.
They're just not in my books. The people who do bad things in my books tend to be human
Yeah.
and kind of every day, and one bad decision leads to another kind of thing, which I think is more what happens to people in the real world. Uh,
I
so,
think so, yeah. And there's nothing scarier than innocence gone bad. That
yeah, it's
is the
true.
creepiest thing ever. So, now, do you have any advice for people who might be considering working with a co-writer? Any
Uh,
pitfalls to avoid, perhaps?
yeah, first, come up with an agreement to start.
Mhm.
We didn't until we got an agent, and then the agent wrote up an agreement for us, which helped. But you really want to know what happens if one writer bails and the other one doesn't want to and wants to continue writing the series. What happens if the books never sell? Who owns the rights? There's all kinds of ways that you can get burned later.
Mm.
Um, I'm in the Authors Guild, which is such a wonderful organization for professional writers and is now open to self-published writers as well. And they have all kinds of contract help, which I didn't know at the time, but I could have gone to them for help putting together I mean, you don't want to, you're making no money, so the last thing you want to do is get more in the red going to a
Right.
lawyer, you know. So, but the Authors Guild has that kind of support, so they can help you with boilerplate contracts that are at least a starting point. But yeah, make an agreement. What if the book doesn't get finished and one person finishes it? Just think of all the things that could happen.
Mm. And I mean, that's good advice, I think, for any field, but in writing, things can get so personal so quickly because writing is a very personal craft. It's definitely
Yeah.
good to know to know where you're going next.
Yeah,
So
when I was writing with Don, just as an aside,
yeah.
there came the main character is, of course, loosely based on him. Loosely, I thought. But then when it came time for the character to get a car, and I wanted him to get a Subaru, Don objected that his character would not get, it was a red, his character would not get a red Subaru. I was like, Don, he's fiction, but obviously not.
That's funny. So, you're known as a writer of suspense. What do you think, speaking as a writer and then, teaching a teacher of writing, what do you think are the most important ingredients for writing suspenseful fiction?
For writing, well, it's to start just, you have to be able to finish a book.
Yeah.
And that is no small feat. I always say writing is like knitting a really, really, really long muffler. You just go on and on and on and on. It's so many words, and it has to all hang together, you know. And so I think stamina is really important. The second thing is you have to be able to listen to criticism and absorb it, and act on it in your own way without becoming personally insulted.
Mm.
Um, but then suspense, I think you have to be patient. I think suspense is one of those things that builds slowly in a novel. It's not like writing a lot of action, which, slam bam. Suspense is the accretion of sensory details usually and thoughts. And it raises slowly, it releases, it raises, it releases. You have to you have to be a patient writer to and harness setting. Setting. I used to think that setting was just window dressing was what but in a suspense novel, it's the meat. You use suspense to create. You use a setting to create suspense. It's your vehicle. It's the character experiencing the weather, experiencing the shadows, experiencing the why is that phone off the hook question,
Right.
you know? Yeah. And then so you have to be willing to write patiently and slowly, but then you have to listen to criticism because you're never going to get there if you don't.
And maybe you already answered this, but what makes the suspense genre so special?
Oh gosh, is it?
I
Uh,
think it is.
yeah. Who do you think of as suspense writers when you say that?
Mary Higgins Clark is one
Yeah.
of them. Yeah, she's
Yeah.
probably need to be the top one that I think of. I read her books very avidly in the past, and it was, I mean, you couldn't put it down, even if it seemed like nothing was happening at the time, but
Yeah.
there was this undercurrent
Right.
that you could sense, and I just always considered her a master of the craft.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to learn how to do that exactly. 'Cause I do some writing, but I'm not of that level. And so it's just, I don't know. There's something about it that, I mean, maybe it's just me, but clearly not, because you have a lot of fans yourself.
Yeah. No, I think suspense takes a certain kind of reader, though. I think people you need to be a reader who likes that, and some readers find it hard to keep turning the pages. It's like, sometimes I'm watching a TV show and it gets too tense and I turn it off.
My wife does that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's different kinds of fiction for different kinds of readers.
Sure.
My suspense is not super scary, except maybe when you get to the climactic scene in the novel, and then it's pretty off the charts.
Hmm.
But but I really try to modulate it and keep my readers assured that everything is going to be okay. And I have to say, one of the things that makes me stop reading is if I'm afraid a child is going to be hurt,
Hmm.
or a character that I love is going to be killed. And I try to be conscious of that when I write and make my readers feel, I know this is terrible to say. I'm not supposed to admit this. I try to make myself and my readers feel safe, that children are not going to be hurt,
Yeah.
and that a character that's a good person probably isn't going to get strangled in the next scene, or if they do, they're going to survive. And I, I think that's cheating a little bit, but that's the way I write. I write what I want to read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily cheating. I mean, you can see it in any, say, for example, movie franchise where you clearly the main character isn't going to die because the franchise would go away and they're not going to give up those kind of dollars. But it's still suspenseful when he's in a dangerous situation. So I think you can have your cake and eat it too in that case. But speaking of that, what is the most difficult part of your artistic process, do you think?
Writing.
Okay.
Seriously, writing. Getting one word and then another word and then another word. It's just the process of getting it first draft, I guess.
Yeah.
I love rewriting, but there's different kinds of writers. Some love rewriting and some hate it. But I love rewriting. If I have something to work with, I'm just happy as a clam. But if I don't, then it's figuring out what the heck is going to happen next. And even if I have an outline, I always second guess myself. I'm not sure where I'm going, even if I have laid down a path. I just constantly rework and rework and rework and second guess myself until I get to what I like. And it's a mess. Yeah, it's a real mess. I wrote
Well,
a book about writing, but I don't do any of the things that I thought I do.
well, know the rules and then break them, I think is a handy adage to have, so you're off the hook. But are there any techniques you have that can get you to sit down and put down those words when you just don't feel it working?
Good question. Yeah, I step away from the keyboard, take a walk, do the laundry. I I make pictures. Like I don't know. When I was in high tech, we did a lot of mind mapping. Just drawing idea trees and seeing where one idea led to another. Because sometimes the problem is I'm bored by what I have to write next, which means it's not the right thing to write next, which means I have to figure out what else could I write next. And then just brainstorming on paper in as a flow chart rather than trying to type on the computer helps. Another thing that helps is rereading what I wrote and trying to get a running start and remember what I was thinking when I wrote that, and where I want to go with it. So that's another way. Take the phone and set a timer
Hmm.
and turn off the internet and turn off the telephone and make yourself work even just for 20 minutes. And that will often get you unstuck. So that's just some of the things.
Do you have a daily word limit you try to reach?
Yeah. If I'm in the middle of writing a novel, which I'm not right now, which I should be right now, but I'm not because I'm preparing to launch another book. Um, my limit is 500 words.
Hmm.
Not my limit. Limit's the wrong word. It's a lower limit, not an upper limit. I try to write 500 words a day, and if you did that, you'd have my books are around 80,000 words or 75,000 words, so it would take 6 months every day. 500 words is a page and a half, double spaced, 12 point Times New Roman, and if you write at that clip every day, and it only takes like an hour and a half, 2 hours, you'd be done in 6 months. It's pretty astonishing. The problem is that my actual writing process is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 more steps forward, 6 steps back. I'm constantly iterating and trying to figure out what a better way to do what I just did is. It usually takes me about 2 years to write a book.
Hmm. So your latest book is You'll Never Know, Dear. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes,
Could you tell us a little bit about that book?
I would love to. You'll Never Know, Dear it's about a woman who makes dolls. It's a doll maker. She's an older woman. She started making dolls for her 2 daughters, and she makes porcelain portrait dolls. Now, dolls are creepy. Porcelain
Yes,
portrait
agreed.
dolls, which look like the child that they were given to, like creepy squared, super creepy. So I've always wanted to write about dolls. I just think they're so interesting in the way that we love them and they scare us at the same time, like clowns, you
I think
know.
it's that innocence gone bad thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Or that they could blink at you.
Right.
And that's, of course, the fantasy that you have as a child if you have dolls is that, oh my goodness, my doll moved. She must be alive. Anyway, she gives both of her daughters, when one is 7 and one is 4, these porcelain portrait dolls, and then she develops a little business in creating them. But the 2 children at one point are playing in the yard, and the younger one is kidnapped, and the doll goes with her. The book opens 40 years later. The doll comes back. Yeah. So even when I say that, I still get a chill down my back.
I'm not sure where to go from here.
Yeah, the
Running
doll
from the
comes
room.
back.
I don't
So the story is it's not about losing a child, it's about finding a child. It's
Right.
about figuring out what happened to her. And the older sister, of course, has been guilt-ridden all these years. I mean, she was supposed to be watching her baby sister in the yard. The mother is guilt-ridden because she shouldn't have made her daughters watch themselves. And what was she doing anyway when they were out there? And I set it. It's the only book I've set well, no, actually, I've set other books in places I don't know that well, but I felt like a doll maker didn't belong in New England or New York City, which are the places that I know well. I wanted to put her in the South. And so I set it in Beaufort, South Carolina, which is a beautiful, beautiful city, at which I had been to a couple times. And I made another trip down there for the research. And I wanted to have that southernness about it. I wanted a slower book. People talk more slowly. It's more about, I don't know, grace and beauty and things. Dolls just belong there to me.
Mhm.
So I set it there. I couldn't call it Beaufort because Beaufort is too well known. It's got this amazing history. It's got phenomenal writers that wrote about it. And I just couldn't match that. So I renamed the city that I write is called Bon Secours. But it's really Beaufort. If you know Beaufort at all,
I
you
don't.
recognize everything.
Yeah. Really well. You obviously did it well. It was named a finalist for the Mary Higgins Clark Award. Speaking of Mary Higgins Clark, an Earphones Award winner and one of the top 10 mystery and suspense audiobooks of 2017 by Audiophile. So your next book, coming up is Careful What You Wish For. Is there a publication date for that?
August 6th.
August 6th, okay. Um, could you tell us anything that won't, no
Oh, yeah.
spoilers at all?
Um, I'm married to a man who can't pass a yard sale without stopping. So I wanted to write about a person who helps, a professional organizer, who helps people declutter their lives, like a Marie Kondo kind of character.
Oh, the sparking of joy. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
If you don't like it, if it doesn't spark joy, but she has no advice for getting rid of a pack rat spouse. So, so I wanted to write about the thing about stuff and marriage. I don't know if you have a significant other that you live with, but
Yes.
it's a challenge if you don't have exactly the same level of keepiness.
Yeah.
So having lived with a man who loves yard sales and collects books, and he's just he's a sweetheart. He has many redeeming features, but but I don't collect anything, really anything, except books. If you can see, I'm surrounded
Oh,
by
yeah, I do
books in
see
my
some.
tiny little office. Um, but that's what I wanted to write about, is a woman who is married to a pack rat, and she's a professional organizer. And she meets a woman whose husband won't let her bring any of her things into the house. So all of her things are stashed in their garage. And she wants to get rid of all of her things now. She's ready to get rid of them, so she calls the organizer in, and they bond over what would life be like without their husbands. So it's a
Interesting.
little bit of Strangers on a Train.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's enough to.
Fascinating. Awesome. So, where can people find you online?
HallieEphron.com, one word, HallieEphron.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, God help me, Twitter, and just look me up. I'm there. And if anybody emails me, I respond to my email. There's a contact button on my website. I'm happy to answer questions or talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hallie Ephron. Thanks for joining us on the Games and Writers Show. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Craig. This was fun.